It's the Friendly Fire Show, episode 137. I'm Steve from Stevivor. It's only Stevivor now. Who are you?
Yeah, that's true. Well, you're Steve and I'm Ben. That's all we need.
Yeah, it's Stevivor's in the title now.
That's it.
And we're now on Spotify, Ben, and Google Podcasts. So we've basically hit the big time.
That's very exciting. I didn't actually know you could listen to podcasts on Spotify. So look what I've learned.
Well, you can. You should check out this one on Spotify.
Oh, I'll subscribe.
Forsaking your podcast player of choice, obviously, because you already have it on that one, you'd think.
That's true. Well, Android doesn't really have a good podcast player. It's got whatever you find on the App Store, so it's not like iPhone.
Oh, there you go. Well, I don't use the Apple podcast one. I use something called Overcast, which I find amazing. And it does weird things like speed up the podcast so there's not weird silences and things like that. So if you are a fast talker already, like me, I seem like I'm on speed or something, which is cool.
So you slow yourself down is what you're saying?
I should try to slow myself down.
That. Or you could save time. Happen. Listen to us at 1.5 times and you can get through this bad boy in about 30 minutes.
Pretty good. Usually goes at about 1.1 or 1.15, depending on the speakers. And for some reason, the Australians in the Australian podcasts that I listen to always sound a little bit faster than the Americans. But that's probably because North Americans talk too fast and we're just used to it. But anyway, not the point, Ben. I know what you've been playing, and it's not been a lot. No offense. I'm not trying to take a dig, but I know I've been playing more than you.
That's
so
true.
I'm going to start, and we'll end up finishing on the one that you've done.
Okay, cool fair enough. That's fine.
All right. Well, then get ready to hear me talk a bunch, because I've played Mortal Kombat 11 and Days Gone, and neither of them are that great, to be honest. Mortal Kombat 11 is probably the bigger shame of the two. It's not even a solid. It's a really good fighting game with a crazy, over-the-top story and just amazing fighting mechanics and brutalities and gory as everything fatalities. It's a really good fighting game when you just look at that core. And then what kills it really are just myriad cosmetic currencies, fight skipping currencies, customization currencies, all these things that are kind of just tacked on that take it from this really good game to something that just kind of reeks like a freemium mobile title that's just constantly trying to get you to spend money. And that sucks. So if I had to try to summarize this, it's this weird thing where someone did some calculations. If you can buy one of these cosmetic skins for a fighter, and there's 60 skins per 25 fighters at the moment, it would cost you $6,400. And the person doing the calculation says, look, I know that they're not all for sale, but the base calculation here is that there's these many skins. You can go on the store. It costs 500 time crystals, which is the real world kind of currency that you can buy. So if you could buy all these skins, it would cost this much. And that was calling attention to that. It was also calling attention to this weird system where if you wanted to get all these skins, you'd have to go through the Towers of Time, which is they've had towers in Mortal Kombat before. And it's also the Injustice 2 thing where, you go through these random challenges. And you can possibly get those skins if you go through and complete the right tower. The other big component of this to get all these, not only skins, but gear and consumables and all these other freaking million things that they have in this game, you need to go through the crypt, which you can only do when you're online because it's basically a loot box system where you're not paying directly in real world money. It's using these in-game currencies. The crypt is completely random. So you could spend 14,000 coins and get a piece of concept art for a level rather than anything that you could use. People were trying to draw attention to that, and then Ed Boon comes out and says, "Oh, fake news! Basically, this you can't pay for every skin. This is horribly factually incorrect." Rah, rah, rah. It's just no, man. Focus on the right thing, and that your game is horribly imbalanced. And despite you guys saying at NetherRealm that you're not trying to take money off of people, that's wholly what you're doing, and it makes me kind of angry. I'm probably just babbling on now. What am I not talking about, Ben? Ask me some questions if you feel like it.
Well, I just had a quick look on Metacritic, and it looks like one of those games where critics generally haven't really considered that. Only 13 reviews are in on Xbox, but it's got an 87 rating. Then you look at the user score, and it's down to a lowly 2.2 from 250 reviews. So,
oh, jeez,
it's one of those situations where the critics don't really consider the money gouging because they haven't had to actually spend any money on it. I think this happens a lot.
Yeah,
and users are just filthy about it, as they probably should be, because they see that a lot more, especially pre-release when the store isn't open yet. You can't really tell what this is going to cost. But in these full-price games, yeah, it's annoying. And it really kind of sullies the launch of otherwise what was going to be a pretty top title, I would have thought, in April.
Oh, yeah. And like the weird thing about this is that I think it's pretty clear that NetherRealm knew what they were trying to do, kind of testing the waters to see how much they could kind of like nickel and dime people.
They've done the EA method.
Well, yeah, and none of this was in the beta. None of this was kind of discussed. You know, like Ed Boon came out and said, you know, like there's no loot boxes in this game, which I'm really kind of sick of hearing about really as a selling point. Like that shouldn't be something of note. Like there's no loot boxes. There's not direct
for Star Wars.
Well, yeah, I guess so. There's not direct loot boxes, but the crypt is just one big loot box fest, and it's so randomized. At least like in I think Mortal Kombat 10 or 9, the crypt had the same kind of system where you had to spend coins with a K to get stuff, but you could map out what was in each chest. So if you wanted to get a specific item and went and looked it up, you knew to travel to this location, hit A, pop the chest, and you like Liu Kang's fireball or whatever. This is wholly random, so you can't do that. And you basically just spend money hoping you get the things that you want. I've unlocked so many things for Shao Kahn, and I don't even have him as a player. And I don't want to spend $10 to unlock him. So it's just that kind of stuff that makes me really salty.
If this was a free-to-play game rather than a $100 full-price game, would you be happy with how they implemented it?
Well, I'm not happy with those kind of implementations anyway, but I'd be happier. Like it would make, if you wanted to spend some money on it because you wanted like give them some love and show them some support because you are playing a free game, cool. Like I'm sort of okay with that. I'm more okay with that, I guess, anyway. Not this. This is a AAA game that's trying to take your money. It's gross. In my opinion.
Which other AAA game have you been playing?
I think it's so bad we can't call it a AAA game, Ben, but it's called Days Gone.
Triple B game?
Triple B game. It's, hyped by Sony as a AAA game. It's made by Ben Studios, plural. And if you aren't familiar with them, they've done a whole bunch of like PSP and PS Vita games. I think the Uncharted, what's the Uncharted one called? Lost Legacy, because that's the PS4 one.
The PS4 one. It's called Drake something, isn't it? I can't remember.
Drake's Fortune? No, that's one of the real ones.
That's
anyway, the first game. It's an Uncharted game on a PlayStation Portable platform rather than a bona fide console. It was announced back in 2016, I believe, and it was supposed to come out last year in 2018. It was delayed into this year. And if you ask me, they could have delayed it another year and maybe it would have been decent. It's just one of those games that, one, it's wholly derivative and it's just like picking and choosing all of the things that they liked about Far Cry or Red Dead, and not doing whatever it's kind of borrowed from as well as the original. It's just buggy as all hell. You hit like a rock and your bike just like rockets into the air as if you're taking off to go to the moon. Hit detection is horrid around any kind of building like thing. If you try to hit a zombie, and they're zombies, I'm not calling them freakers, I don't care. You will just basically swing around them for some reason, but they will just like one hit you with their stupid zombie claws. It's so long. It's probably about 30 hours to complete the campaign, but most of that is just padding and fetch quests and just really boring stuff. You have to, I think it's pretty common knowledge that the guy's wife is dead. So you have to drive to her tombstone, which is like in the top corner of the map near nothing, like 4 or 5 times. And you drive there and basically stand there for 5 seconds and go, narrative. And then you have to drive all the way back down to the bottom of the map again. And there's fast travel, which is just garbage because there's this weird crafting element to it where you need to just pick up everything in the environment at all times. So you're not really doing a lot apart from walking 3 steps, mashing a button to pick something up, repeating that until your inventory is full, then going into the crafting menu and making a medicine pouch or a Molotov cocktail, and then because you have some space again in your inventory, picking everything back up again. Nothing's randomized, so if you run out of stuff, driving's useless and worthless because you have to keep repairing the bike and putting gas in it. Like, it uses more gas than a jet engine does. So you start just fast traveling to the bases that you've unlocked, picking up the components, making what you need to, filling up your bike with gas because the gas tank is just beside that pillar. Fast traveling to the next place, getting more stuff. It's just, like, everything about it is close but not good, and it just ends up being a frustrating experience that is nowhere near Sony first party titles like Spider-Man or God of War or Horizon. It's just disappointing, I guess, is the best way to put it.
It was going to happen eventually from Sony, and I was going to say, when they first announced this, even back then, it was just lacking that kind of Sony first-party shine and polish to it, which, as you say, God of War had, Spider-Man had, Horizon had, and they had this real long run of games where they didn't release a kind of dodgy or lower than AAA level game.
Yeah.
And it just never felt like Days Gone was going to hit that. It kind of felt dodgy when they first announced it. It never really kind of popped, and I was never really excited about it for that reason. So I'm not going to play it now. You've sold me on not playing it.
Well, and kind of like, there's so many weird things about it in that you get a lot of like real, it's not really like, well, that's not true. You get this Last of Us vibe from it, which is strange because Sony has The Last of Us. And if we're talking about like a zombie apocalypse kind of game, like getting rid of the, open world or not, The Last of Us is so much better. So I don't know why Sony's suddenly trying to have kind of like two competing things in the same space. I'm not sure if this game is out now and not delayed again because Sony's just kind of desperate for some content. They're so used to going to E3 and showing all these games that are going to come out in like 6 years. I think they've just put Days Gone out now because they needed to buy some time for The Last of Us and all these other titles to kind of be ready when they're ready. Or, if it was just meant to come out and they thought this was the best they could be, then studios can't develop a game on a console to save their lives. The other weird thing about...
it's probably both.
Yeah, maybe.
They probably realized that, we'll just take the hit now. It's not going to get any better. Plus, I would say everything that's coming out next year is going to be cross-gen, probably. I think Last of Us 2 is going to be on both consoles. Death Stranding, they've already suggested, will be on both consoles. So This is probably the type of thing which they think this is not PS5 worthy. So let's just get it out now. Let's get it out early in the year when it can kind of be forgotten. And that's their strategy. And
the one weird thing that I just really couldn't shake is that, so you're playing in Oregon so many days or months after this zombie apocalypse has happened, but you keep kind of flashbacking into the initial outbreak stage. And you're there with Boozer, who's your kind of like companion through the normal game. And you're there with Sarah, who's your wife. And the way that the flashbacks play out is that they kind of do this weird fade in, fade out thing. And I couldn't shake the entire time that you were meant to be playing that scenario. And the flashbacks were, like actual cutscenes that were going to be tacked on at the ends of gameplay at that point, which, to be honest, that story was more engaging than anything that I played was. But then if you were playing that outbreak situation, then it literally would just be The Last of Us 1.5. So it's like, I just don't quite understand the logic behind who greenlit this game and why they decided it was going to be a good idea and why they didn't just, do something completely different.
But it was announced in 2016 and came out in 2019, so that's pretty good for Sony.
It is.
I actually thought when they announced Last of Us Part 2 that it was coming relatively soon, like within a year or so. I don't think it had started development. I think it was pre-production when they announced it. So it's still... I mean, I just saw last week that they were still motion capturing for it. So
yeah, they just finished that.
Ages away.
Yeah.
I think that's a PS5 game.
I think so too. Well, and I think Sony's kind of... I think they're pretty much done. They're just happy to sell PS4s until they can't anymore. They've got... And like, fair enough too. They've got a library of games that would make someone who's just bought a PS4 very, very happy. And you can't really say that about Xbox. So they're kind of in a good place just to kind of roll into PS5.
They are, yeah. Especially if it's going to be backwards compatible. But we'll get to that shortly.
Before we do, you get to talk about your game finally.
Absolutely. The game of the year, I would say, Box Boy plus Box Girl. That's a bit of an overreaction.
Wow.
Game of the year under $20. There you go.
Resident Evil 2 beats that.
I forgot about Resident Evil 2.
Yeah, game of April for sure. Absolutely. Definitely
Game
wins
of
April.
that costs $15. There you go.
Game of April that doesn't matter about the cost. It's way better than Mortal Kombat and way better than Days Gone, especially for your buck.
That's true. It is a great game. I love the other two. You played the first two on 3DS, right? The
first three, yes.
First three. They all run together. They're so good. So it's pretty much exactly the same thing. Box Girl, as far as I can tell, is the same character with a bow tie or a hair bow, whatever she's got.
Or you can buy, you can get customization things. So my guy ended up having cat ears, a mustache, and a vampire cape.
Now, I don't really care about any of that, but there's something to earn, I suppose. So there's a reason to try to finish the levels with a little star on it, which means you've done everything you can. But it's just a really simple and easy and pick up and play puzzle game. So it's exactly the same as the other two, more or less. There is a 2-player mode, I think. I may have skimmed past that.
There is.
I'm not interested. But
so you can play as one person. You can switch between the two characters and kind of just do it yourself, or you can literally just have a second player jump in and you control one player each. Is it
you need to both be on the same page, or is it little brother can kind of play as player two, but you do all the actual work?
No, you can. Well, so I didn't do a lot of it. I think some of the levels are basically just the same ones that you play as single player. So you could have someone just kind of tooling around doing nothing, and you could just solve it yourself. Obviously, if they're making boxes and stuff, you break your limited of number of box uses and stuff, but whatever. I don't think it matters.
Not like Snipperclips where it's just tears families apart because player two can't rotate correctly and snip. Come on.
Correct.
Yes. You can see what happened to my Snipperclips adventure. But anyway, it's in the same vein as that, really. It's just a little pick up and play. You can play it for 5 minutes. You could probably play it for an hour. It suits Switch really well because while you could play it on TV, and I do think the Pro Controller works well because you can use the proper D-pad on it.
Yeah.
It does suit a handheld really well. So you can just kind of pick it up and play briefly while you're waiting for something to happen. And it's one of my favorite Nintendo franchises.
I reckon. And I had to play it through, start to finish as quick as I could. So it was kind of a couple sittings, but it really suits that. I'm going to go catch a train. I've got 5 minutes to kill you, knock out 2 levels. And it's not like you need to remember what the narrative was when you pick it up the next time. It's just a puzzle game. And it's really good. For $15, it's 270 different levels. So, and they're not super, super varied, but it's not like you feel like you're playing the same thing over and over.
It's enough. It's a pretty simple mechanic. So for people who haven't played it, you just spawn boxes, which is limited to a certain amount on each level. And you use those to get past some very minor obstacles, really. There's, some spikes, there's glowy yellow things, there's some ledges you have to try to get to. It's not super complicated, but that's pretty why it's easy to pick up and play. If you put it down for 6 months and you come back to it, you're not going to forget what you're doing. Like, sometimes you get halfway through a puzzle game and there's something new introduced and you just have no idea what this means anymore and you have to go back a bit.
Yeah.
I don't think that would happen.
That's kind of the only thing I didn't like about it so much. Like, once it gets going, it's challenging and good, but I kind of feel like I've played so many of these before. The first 3 worlds or so were just really tedious. It's like, yeah, I get this. Like, I don't need to play 6 levels teaching me how to make a box and jump on it to get to the next platform kind of thing. But that's a pretty minor gripe, to be honest.
I think that's the thing when you change platform as well, is you can't assume people have played 3DS games. You have to think that there's going to be people who haven't played before. You have to show them how it works. And Nintendo's always a bit handholdy, so you know that going in.
Oh, yeah.
The first 15 minutes are just, basic tutorial.
So the move to Switch means it doubled in cost to $15 as opposed to a $7 game on 3DS, but it also gives you 2.5 times the content that you've got in a 3DS version. So
That's pretty fun.
Can't say anything about that. That's bad because it's super good value, I reckon.
And it's HD, so those nice clean lines. There you go. That's what you want in a boxy game. A clean line, not a 240p blur.
Exactly. So there you go. Gaming was pretty awful in April, except for Box Boy. Well done, Box Boy. You've saved it. Though it does have, if you're going into that kind of customization route, you have to buy the customization items from a vending machine. And again, it's like RNG. And I'm just kind of sick of that garbage. I just wish you could go into something and decide to spend your money on a pair of cat ears, knowing you're going to get some cat ears instead of random object. It's kind of just that's annoying me of late in video games. Just ugh, I don't have time for this.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I've ignored it entirely, so I just walk straight past that door in Box Boy. Do not care.
Good job. Should we get to the PS5?
We should. The big news
we can't call it the PS5. It's not technically the PS5, is it?
They will piss a lot of people off if they don't call it the PS5. That is going to ruin some OCD. If people have their full collection and there's PlayStation, PS2, PS3, PS4, and then it's just like PlayStation Ultimate or something.
PS4.
That is going to annoy people.
PS4 1080 is what they should call it, just to really make it confusing. They're not going to do that. I don't have any of the specs in front of me, and I also really don't care about the specs, to be honest.
It's more powerful than the PS4 Pro. That's it.
Yeah. So
you get the gist.
Sony's gone to Wired to do an exclusive on this, and it was Mark Cerny, the lead architect on the PS4, talking about all the bells and whistles that the next Sony console is going to have. They wouldn't call it the PS5. And I don't know the specs. They seem very crazy. They will technically support 8K resolution, from what Cerny said. Backwards compatibility with PS4 and PSVR. Cerny wouldn't say if they were building a new VR headset. It sounded more like they were just going to keep the existing one for now. And he's also gone after the fact and said, in terms of price, gamers should be happy with what the price is going to be, considering what's inside of it, which sounds terrifying to me.
That's an easy one to just give no answer to that.
Well,
what does that mean?
It comes off to me as like this is going to have so much really expensive stuff inside to make this amazing gaming experience for you. Like, it's going to cost you $1,000 in Australia. Like, it's the PS3 all over again.
The next gen is going to be way more expensive than this one. So the Xbox One X was, I think, $650 when it launched in Australia. We're going well above that. So expect a price increase. These are not going to drop. I think we'll look back and the PS4 and Xbox One launches will look cheap in comparison.
Yeah.
And the Aussie dollar was pretty strong back then as well. You've got to factor that in. So,
but like, the thing is, I don't want something, and I don't know, like, technically how that 8K resolution is going to work out. Like, if it's kind of like the PS4 Pro doing kind of like 4K, but not quite, like not native 4K, but I'm
certain that's it. It's doing just enough that it can put 8K on the box, but it's not an Xbox One X native 4K equivalent. So we might get a little indie game, which is Box Boy style, that's native 8K, and that will be it. And what's the point? No one's going to have an 8K TV this generation.
I don't want
Probably the next one after that.
Focus on 4K and 60 frames per second, and then I would be a happy camper. Like, that's I think anything above that right now is ridiculous. They should.
I think being able to output at 8K and having the power to do it in a very small level game doesn't change anything. I think that's just part of it.
Yeah.
So the Xbox will probably be the same, but they won't release any 8K content. Doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I hope not. What else do we know about it? Not going to happen in 2019. They didn't really give another release window beyond that.
The main thing actually was no loading time. So it's going to have some type of SSD in it.
Oh, yeah.
Which the Xbox One Elite, I think, had a small SSD in it. Am I remembering that correctly?
I don't think any of them have, but I might be wrong.
Haven't?
I don't think so. But...
Oh, no. Or maybe... Actually, no, it was an add-on. So there's an official Xbox SSD that you can plug in as an external drive. I don't know why you do that. You could just use any.
Yeah. Because they can mark up the price that way, Ben.
That's true. But they made it sound like this is the default hard drive. So it's going to have to at least be the smallest console next gen you'd think will be a terabyte. That will be very expensive if that's what they're doing. Unless they have a system where your game you're actively playing automatically moves to the faster hard drive and you have just kind of a standard one to hold them on when they're not being played.
That just seems like a nightmare.
That was their big selling point. No loading times. So we'll have to see if that actually works and how it plans out.
Well, it didn't work for Days Gone because it takes literally 2 minutes, 30 seconds to get from booting up the game to starting to play it.
Well, that's not on PS5. Apparently on PS5, that's going to take 1 second.
Instantaneous.
So we will see.
Yeah, well,
when am I going to check Twitter? Actually, this could be good for me because I can get off Twitter. If I don't have those loading screens, I can delete it.
There you go.
Perfect.
Now, not...
Oh,
go ahead.
The only other thing was backwards compatibility. So Sony made a pretty big deal that nobody cares about backwards compatibility on the PS4. They said, why would you ever want that, basically?
Yeah.
And I guess on the PS3 too, because they ditched the PS2 emulation pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Then Xbox has absolutely nailed it, and they've really backtracked on that, saying, actually, that's a good idea. We're going to include that.
Yeah. Well, Sony's always like a little bit backwards on that kind of stuff, so it's good that they're kind of they're not admitting that they got it wrong, but at least they're, doing air quotes the right thing moving forward. And like the PSN ID thing, which is also news, and we could just add that in here, I suppose. You can now change your PSN ID if you want. And for the most part, it works great. But then there are games, because of the way that they initially developed the PSN ID system, like if you change your ID and access that game, you lose access to trophies and, like DLC that you've bought for it and save data, just because it was never meant to.
Never meant to be.
Yeah. So, like, I like that Sony's, like, they're not anywhere compared to Nintendo. Like, Nintendo's online strategy is still just absolutely broken, but Sony's slowly kind of coming in line more of like a Microsoft service. And I think, like Microsoft's online stuff is hard to beat.
It is.
That's because it's Microsoft.
It took a long time. People were talking PS3 days, why can't we change our ID? Because you could on 360 back then. To the point where I started a new one for the PS4 because I decided I'll just start a new ID. I want them to all be aligned on all platforms and I can't change it on PSN. Now it's kind of way too late. It's like 8 years too late for me now. So I would love a way to be able to roll them together or at least get my license ownerships off my old one because I didn't want to start a new one. You kind of made me, Sony. So they don't care about people like that, but that would be the nice thing to do.
Of course not. Moving on.
Yeah.
Not obviously in direct competition with the upcoming PS5, but Microsoft, for some reason, announced finally the worst kept secret of the Xbox One S all-digital console edition.
The Xbox One sad, as it has become known. I'm surprised they didn't pick that up.
It's so ridiculous. Which does not have a confirmed release date yet in Australia, which is fine because it makes 0 sense for Australia.
Except that I play all my games digitally, but I already have 2 Xbox One, so they're not targeting me. They're targeting someone who doesn't have one and will need to download all their games from the beginning.
But to be frank, Ben,
really, they're downloading someone.
If you didn't have an Xbox One S, you wouldn't buy this one because it's overpriced. Even with 3 games bundled in it, you could go and buy an Xbox One S with a disc drive and still do the digital option, but to save money by buying a disc drive, I guess.
Yeah. So I did a little quick look. So we don't have an Australian price, but $250 US, which plus tax, because they don't have tax on their price, is about $350 Australian. Did an Oz bargain searching. There have previously been 1 terabyte Xbox One S's for $199 in Australia. So this is getting close to double the cost, which doesn't make any sense because you lose the 4K Blu-ray player is basically what you get if you're not using this drive for anything else. So it's an odd choice. American pricing must be different. Is there anything I can think of? Maybe they don't have the sales that we have.
People have been saying the same kind of things I haven't really done a lot of digging, but on Reddit, people are saying like, why would you buy this? Here's like 3 links to ones that are cheaper.
And the strategy of bundling in those 3 games doesn't make sense to me because I would think that Game Pass is the selling point here. Yeah. So instead of those 3 games, I think 2 of which are on Game Pass anyway, they should have just bundled in 12 months of Game Pass. Like, why did they do that? I don't get it.
Neither. But
so I'm not sure about
neither
this.
am I. Something that I am more excited about.
I think there is room.
I guess, but the pricing has to make way more sense, especially with like they sold the Xbox One S as a 4K Blu-ray player for a little while there. Like that was its selling point.
Taken that out. It was its cheapest. Yeah, it was the cheapest 4K Blu-ray player. This should have been $150 US, 200 Australian, and then I could see a place for that for 12 months. Yeah. But at the moment, I don't know what.
And if you're trying to combat that type of thing, then you also work with Netflix and get access to like a 4K subscription for like a 3-month 4K Netflix subscription. Like, just make it make sense, make it worthwhile.
Yeah, no Game Pass is the most confusing thing for me. I don't get that at all.
There you go. Something that does make more sense is the, and we called it, by the way, Ben, the combination of the Xbox Game Pass and Xbox Live Gold subscriptions, now called Xbox Game Pass Ultimate, which is a mouthful. $15. We ran the numbers and I don't have them in front of me, so just go to the site and look it up. It is cheaper. It's obviously cheaper on the monthly basis because there's only a monthly Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription that you can buy. So there's a whole bunch about it. It's cheaper. It's $15 as opposed to $20 per month Australian.
Cheaper if you pay monthly. It's way more expensive if you buy in bulk and stack your 3 or 6 or 12 month subscriptions. So depends what you do.
But I kind of like the idea of it. It's just like one subscription that you have to manage rather than 2. but like whatever.
That's true, but I mean, my Xbox Live Gold and Game Pass expire like at the end of next year, so I'm good. I don't need to worry about managing anything for a while.
That's true.
So I would like to see some deals on those, because I think on my Xbox Dash at the moment, I have both Live and Game Pass for 50% off. So they need to do the same thing with this bundle. Otherwise, it's still going to be cheaper to buy them separately.
Yeah, I think they probably
I'm sure
will.
they will
It's just, it's that thing where it's new and they don't want to like bog people down with all those kind of like potential what if kind of things. So Microsoft wouldn't confirm to us if they'll do 6 or 12 month subscriptions to Ultimate. Right now it's just month to month. But and like what? So Xbox Live you can go 1, 3, 6, 12. Xbox Game Pass I think you can only do in 3-month bits. Like it's really confusing.
Yeah, but then I bought a 6 months one at some point when it was on sale, and I know you had issues trying to get that 3-month deal, and I actually went back and looked again and I couldn't get it on my phone later. For some reason it was just offering me 1 month, which I think you had as well when I tried to sign in. But then I went to the dashboard of my Xbox and there it was for 3 months. It's still available there. Weird. So there's something not quite right about this.
Well, there you go. I don't have much more to say about that unless you do.
Yeah. No, we called it last week. So once again, they've listened to us. Or last episode, I should say.
We're amazing.
Absolutely.
I think that's...
that's all we know about the new consoles. The only thing I would say, there was a rumor about the Anaconda, the next Xbox, straight after the PS5 stuff, which I'm sure is no coincidence, that basically said it's even more powerful.
Yeah.
That's all you need to know. Mic drop. So it's already starting very early. I'm sure we'll learn more about that from Xbox at E3, and Sony will announce probably just after, I would say, maybe at Paris Games Week or their own event.
Yeah.
Probably later in the year. And we'll see what happens.
With Sony kind of jumping the gun on this, you would hope that Microsoft is going to respond in kind.
Kind of.
Well, not jumping the gun,
I
but
heard
like getting
people
in early.
say, Sony's announcing really early, but Xbox announced at E3 last year, yes, we're making a next-gen console, and that's basically what all Sony said. They said it's a bit more powerful and it's backwards compatible, which we know that about Xbox as well. It'll have both those things. So they haven't really said anything that Xbox hasn't said. They've just kind of made it a bit more of a bigger deal because they announced it exclusively through Wired. Yeah. So not that different. What I am interested in is what are they going to do with the controllers next generation? Because I think this gen, we pretty much got 2 close to perfect controllers. Yeah. There's some little things which could be fixed. I never really liked the DualShock. Like, it was fine up until the DualShock 4, which I think massively improved it. It's a much nicer weight. It's a little bit bigger, so it feels nicer. Better triggers, better sticks.
Just get rid of the touchscreen.
The Xbox One Elite.
Just kill the touchscreen.
Well, that's the thing. So they wasted a lot of space with that. It's basically a giant select button, or whatever they call select. Yeah. It's what it became.
Well, and I'm really bad with it. Playing Days Gone, I went to like quick react to like a zombie that, panicked and I didn't see it come up from behind me. And I went to like do something and my thumb like brushed the touchscreen going to hit X or whatever. And I bring up the map. I'm like, ugh, like all the time. So I think I figured out how to disable it unless I did something specific, but like, ugh, just don't like it.
Well, if we're talking about how they could improve them, let's go through the 2 of them. So there's that. Probably remove the touchpad, just have a select button. I would say the triggers could be improved a little bit on PlayStation. They just don't quite feel as responsive to me. They're a little bit slow sometimes. Yeah. Way better than the Switch, which doesn't even have any. And
it's a lot better than the PS3 controller, but
the PS3 was
like
garbage. That was their worst.
It's still
kind
of like plasticky and like a little weightless. Like it feels kind of cheap. Like it's really good.
I would love an official Elite style controller, but they're not going to do that.
I don't think so either. But then on the Elite...
and battery is the other thing I would do. I think the DualShock battery is the worst of the 3. The Switch one lasts ages.
You could put batteries in where... If you get rid of the touchscreen, you could put batteries in the back of a DualShock 4. And I'm fine changing out rechargeable batteries, to be honest.
Well, they can just do what Xbox does. You get the choice. Batteries or the pack. The Xbox rechargeable pack lasts way longer than the DualShock.
Oh, yeah.
But the DualShock 4 does have more stuff in it. It's got the touch screen. It's got the light bar. It's got motion controls, I think. I haven't even used them for so long, I can't remember, but I'm pretty sure it's got motion controls in it. It's got a microphone in it, or a speaker at least.
It's got a speaker.
All stuff that Xbox doesn't have, and that's probably why the battery life is
But it's also, like, a lot of that stuff is just straight up gimmicky, and I don't need it. Like I love Kinect, but I get that people don't have time for Kinect, and this seems to me like the same kind of vein. Like, here's some stuff that is optional and developers don't really try to develop for because they just can't be bothered. And then it's separate. You can't just make like a Mortal Kombat or whatever and have a straight up PS4 Xbox kind of dev. You got to do all this extra stuff if you want to cater to the touchscreen or the speaker or whatever else. So let's go back to basics.
Yeah.
We don't need all this fancy stuff.
I would say do that. Allow the DualShock 4 to be compatible with the PS5 so that you can play PS4 games, the 3 of them that need the touch pad. So that's an option. They probably won't do that though because they want you to buy new controllers. Xbox, I mean, I think the Xbox One controller in terms of layout is pretty much what I want from a controller, so I don't want any changes there. Nintendo basically
But we're
copied
used to that because that's our controller of, day-to-day choice.
We are used to it, but I think that the offset sticks is much better. The control pad, the D-pad, I mean, they keep improving it, but it's still not as good as it could be. I think it just never quite felt right on Xbox.
And the Elite, for what it is, it breaks way too often.
Yeah, so that's the biggest problem with the Xbox One Elite controller is it breaks. It's got so many flaws. It's a fantastic controller. The weight's great. The buttons all feel great. But then I've had two which the grips have just peeled off on. I know you've had problems with the bumpers, which are pretty standard. Yeah. Now one of my sticks kind of pops out a lot. It's not solid in there. So $200 controller, which is great, except that it only lasts about a year.
And the only good thing you can say about that is that Microsoft's really, really good about replacing them. And I've called in favors and had like Microsoft actually come in and like help me when I've broken my Surface Book and stuff. But like with the Elite controllers, I've just gone like a normal consumer through the, repair and warranty center and like no questions asked, just like straight up replacement. So not that that's good, like, but at least you can get a replacement without dropping another $100 or $200 or whatever they cost.
There's no real gimmicks that I'd remove because they didn't really add any. But the one thing that the DualShock did add, which Xbox really needs to do, they've got a full on their sword here. They need to add the share button because the current system of the tap and the button doesn't work. It's terrible. So Switch has copied it, and it probably works the best out of anything. The Switch screenshot button is like instant, so fantastic.
If we're talking about hardware,
and also I think sometimes the Xbox.
Sorry, they need to have it so if you hit the share button and a little share notification pops up on the screen, like on Switch, you can hit the share button again, and it's not going to capture that extra notification. On PlayStation 4, if you take a screenshot and then you want to take another screenshot, the second screenshot will have like the little yes, that worked kind of like pop up in the top left, which just drives me nuts. Anyway, that's probably just the first world problems. Like I'm taking screenshots for a review complaint, but the Switch does it perfectly.
I think we've fixed the controllers there.
We've fixed everything.
It does. Well, if we're gonna fix the Switch controller, add proper triggers, not the ridiculous little analog buttons, the non-digital buttons.
And never use the Joy-Con individually for a game. It's stupid.
No, and also I would say, having just played Box Boy this morning, the Joy-Cons are too small. Going between the Pro controller and the Joy-Con, the button sizes are massively different. So if we're getting a new Switch this year that's slightly revised, come on Nintendo, proper size buttons.
We're amazing. All right, I don't really have anything else to say unless you do.
I think that's it in gaming news for this week. There wasn't an awful lot.
I agree. So a short podcast is a good podcast. Thanks for joining us, though, dear listeners. Check out the website, use the social medias, say hi, tell us what you're talking about. I've set up an email, so if you want to email podcast@stevivor.com, that'll go both to Ben and I. And you can send some feedback, or you can send some stuff that we might, read out on the show and talk about that. We're open to whatever you have to tell us.
That's very exciting.
I think so.
What do we have coming up next month? We probably have Rage 2.
Yep. I don't know.
And is that
it? I am wholly unprepared to be able to answer that question.
You don't even know. There's that. I know at the end of the month there is Cricket 19 for the World Cup. And that is all that I know.
There's a new Star Trek Online Rise of Discovery expansion heading to PC, which no one but me is excited about. So there you go.
So it's about as exciting as April. These games just have to be better than Box Boy to get our attention.
Done. Deal. It's not going to happen. Game of the almost year minus Resident Evil 2.
Yeah. It hasn't been as strong a start of the year as people are saying, I don't think. Resident Evil 2 has been good. The Division 2 was decent. There's been some okay things, but we haven't had that big blockbuster to start the year.
And
I don't
Rage 2 looks like it's decent, but doesn't really hold my interest that much, to be honest.
Yeah, it feels a bit like the year before the new consoles are going to come out. This
Fancy
always
that.
happens. There's that little lull. Then towards the end of the year, there's that GTA 5 style, Last of Us style big game that they decide this is going to be the swan song. But we're not late enough for that to happen yet. But we're too early for good stuff to be continuing because they've all moved development.
And on that kind of mediocre note, let's finish up.
Yeah, it's mediocre times. And we'll see you in 2
Bye.
weeks.